Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Quijano. It is good to be with you. Thanks for joining us. President Biden signed a batch of executive actions Wednesday as his administration marks one full week in office. The White House has been focusing on one or two issues a day, starting with the pandemic, manufacturing, racial equality, and immigration. Wednesday's theme was climate. Mr. Biden signed a series of executive actions earlier to combat climate change, freezing new oil and gas leases on public lands and offshore waters, quote, wherever possible, and establishing climate as a key element of U.S. foreign policy and national security. President Biden emphasized the need to act quickly and cast the issue as one that can boost the economy as well.
In my view, we've already waited too long to deal with this climate crisis. We can't wait any longer. We see it with our own eyes, we feel it, we know it in our bones. And it's time to act. And it's not time for small measures. We need to be bold. So let me be clear. That includes helping revitalize the economies of coal, oil, and gas and power plant communities. We have to start by creating new good-paying jobs, capping those abandoned wells, reclaiming mines, turning old brownfield sites into new hubs of economic growth, creating new good-paying jobs in those communities where those workers live, because they help build this country.
Kris van Cleave and Anita Kumar join me now. Kris is a CBS News congressional correspondent reporting from Capitol Hill, and Anita is a White House correspondent and associate editor for Politico. Welcome to you both. Kris, let me start with you. These executive actions from President Biden focus on oil and gas leases, but not coal. And it was something that our chief White House correspondent, Nancy Cortez, asked National Climate Advisor Gina McCarthy about this afternoon. Let's listen.
Your executive order talks about oil and gas on federal lands, but it doesn't really say much about coal. What is this administration's policy when it comes to coal?
Well, in terms of the oil and gas decision, is to make sure that we take a little pause and review the entire strategy of how we're looking at public lands. So it will include looking at what new leases ought to be approved and sold. It's looking at our ability also to look at coal in that mix. So the program review is going to look at how we manage public lands consistent with climate, but also consistent with the marriage between climate and really growing jobs of the future.
So, Kris, because of the 50-50 split in the Senate, one of Democrats' most critical votes on this issue is Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia, which is the second largest coal producer in the U.S. after the state of Wyoming. So how important, Kris, is it for the Biden administration's climate agenda to get Senator Manchin on board?
Well, it's critically important. You know, when you've got a 50-50 split, you saw just how fragile that majority is when Senator Leahy was taken to the hospital last night. You know, he's presiding over the impeachment trial. And if he were to be out for a prolonged period of time, that could have threatened the majority. He was back at work today, but the same goes for Joe Manchin. In some ways, he's one of the most influential, powerful senators in Congress right now because he is a conservative Democrat. There are times he's going to side with the Republicans. There are times he's going to side with the Democrats. So you need Joe Manchin in your corner if you're Joe Biden. And that's, I think, one of the reasons you're seeing there was not a lot of focus on coal right here. And Senator Manchin came out today and said he was okay with the pauses that are being taken, that he's okay with them stopping to look at some of these things. But certainly you're going to want to watch when it comes to any changes to policy relating to coal, how you keep Senator Manchin happy if you want to try to move any legislation.
Yeah, he's certainly the Democrat to watch in the Senate. Well, Anita, one of the areas where the president generally has the greatest ability to create change is foreign policy. How does the administration see climate fitting into that?
Well, for the first time ever, really, the White House is saying that they're going to put climate change in the discussions on foreign policy. So that means if they're discussing with a country or a group of countries, they're talking about trade, climate would come up. If they're talking about where U.S. troops should go, if they're talking about foreign aid, what they want to do is have this be a part of every conversation. And that's simply not happened before. When President Obama was president, obviously there was a lot of talk about that. That was a big push of his, but it wasn't presumed to be part of every single discussion with every country. And that's basically what they're saying they want to do. These are complicated by the fact that the U.S. has not yet, in the week that the Biden administration has been in, said what its own domestic goals are. And so there are going to be a lot of countries looking to the United States to say, what are you doing first? Because obviously President Trump, this was not a priority for him. And so what they're wanting to know now is, what is the U.S. doing? The more the U.S. cuts back on emissions, the more leverage it's going to have that conversation with other countries. And John Kerry, you talked about him earlier, says that we're going to have those goals for domestic goals by April. So that'll be a really key moment for countries to be looking at. What is the United States going to do? And then what are they going to ask us to do next?
So, Anita, Kris touched on this a moment ago. Last night, Vermont Senator Patrick Leahy was briefly hospitalized after suffering muscle spasms. He's back at work now, but it highlights once again that tenuous nature of the Democratic Senate majority. That 50-50 split will make it tough to pass all of President Biden's priorities. And I understand you have some new reporting, Anita, on how they might approach the issue of immigration. What can you tell us about that?
Sure. As you know, President Biden campaign on immigration was one of the key areas he's talked about. They introduced their bill, a very comprehensive bill on, in the first 24 hours that they were in office. Senator Menendez introduced that bill for him. But it's a huge bill. And as you know, the last 3 presidents, Democrats and Republicans, have tried to pass comprehensive immigration reform and have failed. It's not just that the 2 parties disagree, it's that there are disagreements within each party on how to approach this. So our reporting is showing that the Biden administration would be open to little bills, a piecemeal approach on comprehensive immigration reform. So not really what they had been talking about, but there are a lot of people that are saying, look, that's the realistic approach. If they hold out for a comprehensive bill, it could take years and it may not even come, even in 2 or 3 or 4 years. So what they're saying is, look, let's try to pass things as quickly as possible. Let's look at, for example, something that they might get some Republican support on with Dreamers, the immigrants that came as young people, no fault of their own, brought by their family members. Let's look at giving them legalization, something like that we can do. And they're even talking about perhaps tacking something on to the coronavirus relief package. So what they're saying is they're being realistic. They're saying that they want this big package, but they know that's going to be tough, and they will be looking at every way they can to push some legislation through.
Meanwhile, Kris, as we reported last night, all but 5 Senate Republicans voted to call the impeachment trial against former President Trump unconstitutional, raising doubts from some Democrats about the prospect of actually reaching 67 votes to convict. Kris, how are they planning to move forward from here?
Well, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has been adamant that there will be a trial in the Senate. So they are going to move forward with the impeachment trial of former President Donald Trump, even if it doesn't look like there's any real likelihood that a conviction will occur. They would need 17 Republicans to vote to convict Donald Trump, and you had 5 that voted to continue on with the trial. So that seems unlikely. We did hear today from Senators Kaine and Collins, who are floating this idea of a congressional censure, essentially rebuking the president instead of impeaching. That would be a much lower threshold to do, and would let the Senate be on the record with its disapproval of the president's actions leading up to the siege of the Capitol here. Another option that has been talked about is pursuing something under the 14th Amendment that could block Mr. Trump from running for office again. That would probably require at least 60 votes, and that may not be there either. So there is still talk of some other options, but the Senate is moving forward with plans for an impeachment trial that'll start in just about 2 weeks.
So, Anita, if the Senate doesn't convict former President Trump or bar him from running for office again, it's interesting. The Associated Press is reporting that the Republican National Committee is planning to stay neutral if Mr. Trump runs in 2024. So how significant is that? And where does Mr. Trump stand on a return at this point?
Yeah, it is really significant. It really does put the RNC in a very precarious position. You know, the chairwoman has been very supportive and very loyal to President Trump, and President Trump endorsed her running again for chairwoman. So, you know, they have been together, you know, all these past years. So it's very interesting that they're saying that now. But of course, he's not the incumbent. He is not the leader of the party per se. So this is sort of what she has to do. And there's going to be a lot of pressure on her, both to stay neutral, but then there's going to be pressure on her from President Trump's base, who really wants her to support him. You know, what we're hearing is that President Trump is really needing to get through this impeachment trial. Obviously, that's his number one priority at the moment, because he needs to find people to represent him, you know, to defend him, and to get through that. I had already been hearing prior to the January 6th riots that he had kind of cooled to the idea. Remember, in November, right after the election, he was telling some allies that he was ready to announce right on Inauguration Day. He would announce that he was running in 2024. And as the weeks passed, he'd cooled to the idea of announcing, partly because he didn't want to fill out the paperwork that he needed to do. That paperwork means that he's going to have to disclose what his financial interests are. And of course, as president, he did that, but he didn't want to continue to do that. So he was going to continue to campaign, but really not make a decision on that right away. I've talked to a lot of people since January 6th, and they feel like he just does not have the support right now to run, that they would no longer support him. These are people that worked for him, that support him in 2016, that supported him in 2020. They feel like after the last, you know, few weeks of what's happened with the riots on Capitol Hill, that he just doesn't have the support, and it's time you know, for someone new to come in. So it's really unclear what the president's thinking. I think his first priority is to deal with the impeachment trial, and then he'll kind of assess where things are. Of course, as we all know, people love a comeback, and so it's possible that, you know, weeks could go by, months could go by, years could go by, and people might start saying, well, wait, what about him? And he might want to get back into it. But as of right now, it just doesn't look that way.
All right, never too early to start talking about 2024, I suppose. Kris Van Cleave and Anita Kumar. Kris, I think this is my first time talking to you in a while. Congratulations on your new gig as a CBS News congressional correspondent. You know, we're going to be turning to you a lot, I think, here in the coming months.
Well, it's always great to be with you, Elaine.
All right, thanks so much, both of you. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.